Beth Barany here for How to Write the Future podcast. I'm a science fiction novelist and creativity coach for writers. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm excited to share with you our top 6 most popular episodes from 2024, from planning your writing life to exploring tropes, storytelling, and world building. These 6 episodes showcase the diverse topics we've covered this past year to help you write positive futures. So let's dive into what resonated most with our listeners this year. Enjoy. This episode is all about planning. Not everybody likes to plan. I totally get it. And if you are one of those people who really prefers to be spontaneous, awesome. There's so much power in that. I love being spontaneous, and I actually really love to plan. And when I don't have things planned out, I actually feel ungrounded. I feel out of control. I feel like I'm missing something. And I also know what it's like to feel ungrounded and out of control and like I'm missing something. I feel like I spend half of my time like that. And when I plan, I feel so much better. A little bit about my philosophy of planning, and then a few tips to offer you if you want some tips on planning as a writer, as a creative. That's where I'm coming from. I have my writing teacher hat on, my creativity coach hat on, and I'm an NLP practitioner, a certified NLP practitioner, and I have that hat on as well. I've been using planning tools for a really long time of various kinds, both in my business life and in my personal life. And I really remember using plans. I called them game plans when I was 17 in high school, a senior year in high school up in Santa Rosa, California. And I wanted to ace all my classes, which I did. And I did that because I set up game plans. That's what I called them then. And that was the first time I really remember being very planning oriented. I love planning so much. I even have a book for fiction writers called Plan Your Novel Like a Pro that I co-wrote with my husband, Ezra Barany. Go check that out if you want tips on planning your novel. So what I love about planning is like, how are we going to get from San Francisco to New York? Well, you could make that decision every day of the trip if you're driving, or you could take some time and decide, oh, I want to take the northern route across the United States, or I want to take the southern route, or the middle of the country. Or no, I don't want to drive, I want to fly. Or no, like my husband did over Thanksgiving recently, he's like, let's take a train. So he took a train. I did not. I flew across the country. He took a train with his mother and they had a great time. Took them 3 days. So my point is, when you think about where you want to go and you think about how you want to get there and you spend some time on those 2 things, that's planning. So, for example, I don't know, I'm in revisions right now and my protagonist is in a completely new environment. She's meeting all these people. And so far, I'm on chapter 3 and she's met, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. We've got 5 new named people that are in addition to her. And so far, they feel pretty essential.
Yes.
At some point, I can hear my critique partners in my head. They're like, why don't you just conflate some of them?
Right.
And so you say tropes, you're like, what if the best friend becomes the betrayer? Or if the helper character also is a threshold guardian type character. So that's an archetype.
Yeah.
So also, yeah.
I find it's helpful to dump them into the same pot, so to speak, with archetypes, because then it's a big area to draw out when I'm working on a story. I don't generally make a big distinction about, oh, that's an archetype, that's a trope. It's because mostly people talk about tropes as, even if they are an archetype, people are more familiar with the word tropes.
Mhm.
And I think the industry uses them so much and we hear them about for marketing purposes and all this.
Right.
But I don't worry about, oh, no, I can't use that. That's an archetype versus a trope. I wouldn't think anybody needs to lose any sleep over that. They're all just telling tools.
How does your book, Feminine Sovereignty, what can it offer? What does it offer to people who are working on their stories or work on their novels, their fiction that is maybe about the future, maybe about another world, like a fantastical setting? Yeah, can you connect how your book connects to what we're working on, storytellers?
Yeah. So, in terms of writing the future, I just want to say Beth and I really reconnected in a class called Tropia, which was offered by Amanda Scott, who wrote one of the forwards for my book and has been a mentor of mine for a few years now. And I just love her. And so, by going through that genre, is about how do we get from where we are now to the culture and the society that we would be delighted to leave to future generations. And so it stimulated even more for me the question about how are we getting to the future that we would be proud to leave when we go, right? How do we get there? What does that entail? And the cool thing about Trutopia is there's many things, but one is it's not about writing a utopia. It's really much based in what is going on in our lives now and what are the next steps that we need to do. And originally it was conceived as a fiction genre, fiction or the short stories or poetry or film or whatever, very much narrative, focused on narrative. And one of the things that I learned and that was really important to me in writing my book.
You're going to figure it out. You probably know the least amount about the world at the beginning. I think that's fair to say. And you continually are growing and expanding it. I think it's being comfortable leaning into those things. But if I had advice for people, I would say, how do you want to look at this? And part of it is, what do you show the reader? Where's the camera located? Where's the lighting? But also, what's that track that's running behind the scenes where you as an author know this is what's actually going on. Here's what the characters know. And then, okay, here's what I'm going to tell the reader. How much continuity you want with that versus I'm okay if this is floating out there. That doesn't bother me. That's an individual choice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just speak from a working writer's perspective that they crave things that are grounded, even while they love the fantastical, whether it's in a sci-fi or fantasy world of all kinds. Readers and viewers are super savvy, especially the younger generation. Like I didn't grow up with the internet, but I notice in people 20, 30 years younger, when they're in their 20s, they have viewed and watched so much more media than I did at that age because we
Yeah.
access. So just speaking from someone who didn't have that when I was growing up, writers have to be aware that their readers are going to be able to see deeper into stories today than maybe before. Readers tend to be a bit more sophisticated. And so we need to make world building choices, if we want, make world building choices in relation to that level of knowledge that our readers have
Yeah.
and just make decisions. Some people think my fantasy world is fantasy light because I'm not writing like Tolkien. But then other people say, wow, it felt so real because I'm writing from my characters' lived experiences. I'm not writing
Yeah.
from encyclopedic entry. So I always
Right.
bring that up in terms of world building. We don't have to know the entire world. We just need to understand how our characters interact and view the world. And then we can do some authorial things. Like you're saying, you can know more about your world than your character does. And that's super fun. So you also have this great question here, which is, what does the process of writing a book from scratch do for you? And you touched on this. So we're contrasting that with AI. You talked about the discovery, or I guess that was my word, but also you're
Yeah.
a pantser. So you must really trust yourself, trust the process, trust that you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
What's that like for you?
Yeah, that's so interesting because, like, in the fifth book of the Satchel Pong series, I had to work really hard to pull together the last 4 or 5 chapters. In the sixth book of the Stetson Jeff adventures, Stetson Jeff is from Texas. It was obvious that it had to end in Texas, and it just fell together. So I guess the answer is, yeah, I got lucky one time at the end of a 6-book series. At the end of the 5-book series, and those are my 2 longest series, whether it's a standalone novel. But when it's a series, like, you've got a lot invested, especially if you've been releasing them one at a time and readers are following along and they're like, how's come we never got any final book from George R.R. Martin? Maybe he never figured out how to end it. I don't know. Maybe he was like, I'm stuck. But you do have to trust yourself that it'll fall into place, or you'll be willing to do the work to satisfy your audience and yourself that this is wrapped up, let's say, adequately, because maybe not every series wraps up as well as the next.
You had to do a lot of work Did that mean you had to do a lot of versions to make it work? You had to try a lot of different things to find the right thing?
Man, I don't really remember.
Mm.
I remember just having to do a lot of thinking about it. Like, where do I want to leave this? And who should die and who should not? The world is burning. Somebody's going to die. I don't think of myself as a real dark dystopian writer.
Yeah.
But there is an aspect of like when the world is ending, some people aren't going to make it out. And that makes it interesting. If everybody was fine at the end, it'd probably be a little bit ridiculous.
Yeah, you
Oh.
set it up to be a dystopia. So, right, somebody has to die.
But
Yeah.
how and
Yeah.
where and when and what?
Yeah, what's interesting? What's intriguing? What keeps your interest? What do you think the readers will be really attracted to, or like it pulls at their heartstrings?
And because I'm a pantser, I'm constantly including new characters, some of whom develop later in a third book or fourth book into somebody really important, and others that never show up again, and which is like a red herring in a mystery, I think. And then sometimes, but when you've got a 5-book series and you've been folding into the dough like 3 or 4 new main characters every book, you get into the 5th one, now you've got like, probably 15 or 20 characters that had a significant enough storyline that they needed to be wrapped up.
We all have priorities in any given moment, and any given moment, something can feel more important than our writing. We have a lot of administrative duties to perform in our life, just the day-to-day living, the dishes, the obligations, and just doing things that feel important to the infrastructure of being a human being. Yes. So I want to say that each person is different, and something that I have seen across the board with all the writers I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds of writers, is that the people who get the writing done on a regular basis prioritize the writing. Now, that doesn't mean you have to put your writing first thing in the morning. Some people advocate that. Wake up, and when you're barely awake, start writing in your journal, and just take what you had from dreamland and put it into writing. I'm not actually an advocate for that. I'm not awake first thing in the morning. If that is you, though, go for it. I believe that each person has a time of day where their energy is in a natural flow state, where if you are following your own rhythm and your own schedule, this is where you naturally put the things you love the most. If you didn't have to be doing anything on anyone else's schedule or other obligations. And I totally get it. We all have obligations, and some more than others. So what I see people do who have children, and I don't have children, so I didn't have to face this, but I thought about it because at one point I thought I might have children, is I watch the women who are writers arrange their lives with support. They have support, and they make sure that their prime time for writing is set aside for writing. So what does that look like? Some writers love writing at night. Some writers love writing first thing in the morning. Some writers, like myself, I like writing in the middle of the day, right after lunch. So I had to learn how to block off time so that I could now have my lunch, feel that leisure time that I really love, and take the next hour after I've eaten lunch to work on my writing. So that has just grown over the years. And even on my calendar, it says lunch and write. So how did I get here? I realized that a few things. One, my most important client was me. So I run a business helping writers, and I was putting everybody else's needs first. The business needs, the client needs, all of that. And I was miserable. I was so unhappy. I'm like, here I am running a business helping writers, and I'm not even doing my writing. What's going on? I was so upset. And this would happen periodically, especially in the first few years of my business. And I felt so pressured to make money and to get things moving. And yet I was suffering deep inside my soul because I wasn't working on my creative work regularly. I would go through these waves where I was like, I would remember writing is so important to me. And then I would do it. But I'd always feel like I was taking away from the business. So it felt like my business and my creative work were fighting for dominance. Me. Over time, I realized I have to, number one, find the prime time for writing. That's it for this week, everyone. Let me know what was your favorite episode of 2024. I would love to know. Write long and prosper.